Welcome to Cooking for Climate, a segment of Nature for Nurture with Candace Chandra. Today, we'll be making a dish which will complement the discussion we've been having on my podcast about water. Let me set you up. This is obviously my first YouTube video, so please cut me a little slack. So, Cooking for Climate is basically putting the principle into effect that what we put in our bodies is a microcosm of what's out in the environment, and the two need to be in balance in order for us to be disease-free or in full health. On my podcast, Nature for Nurture, we're discussing water, the availability of fresh water, and how lately there are a lot of contaminants and chemicals that are found in that fresh water, and what does that mean? So today, on this video, I wanted to show sort of a graphic illustration of what that means. So the ancient cultures believed that the earth is a living entity just like we are, that we're the microcosm and that's the macrocosm, and the universe is the entire whole. So we have the universe inside of us. So they refer to minerals and stones inside the earth as the bones of the earth. So we're going to add the bones of the earth to our stew today. Then they talk about the soil as the living skin of the earth. So today we're going to use sweet potato as representing the skin and the living soil of the earth. On top of that skin lives all sorts of macrobiota, including trees, fungi, bacteria, insects, everything else. But we're going to use the zucchini as an example of all the green things living on the earth. I want you to think of the pot as our planet. As you know from looking at it from outer space, our planet is a nice round orb, very contained, very similar to this round pot. And there's a lot of discussion right now as whether we're creating a hothouse effect in the climate. And I would argue that if you put this top on, which represents our atmosphere, we have always been a hothouse. What we're doing is changing the internal systems within. So the internal systems have always operated in a certain manner, and now we're adding a lot of something and taking away from others, and it's changing the internal balance. So we'll see how that works. So we'll add a little Himalayan sea salt. Salts of the earth have always been found in ocean water, in our bodies, all sorts of things, so that's there. I'm partial to cayenne, so we'll put a little cayenne as the fire of life. Think of it as flowers and other aspects in the world. I'm going to add some ginger. This represents all the pollinating insects and animals like bats, bees, etc. And then we're very lucky that we can get our fresh water from a source, such as a sink. In the universe, water is produced by the explosion that occurs when a star explodes. Water, H2O, is the third most common element in this universe, and literally the hydrogen and oxygen atoms collide together and become a molecule that we know as water upon the explosion of an Earth. So you can, or the explosion of a star. So you can think of water as star material, which I love. Just a second. So I don't know if you can see this. I have almost covered all of the earth particles, the meat, the bones, the skin, the green things, and the salts and the spices, representing the different aspects of earth. And then the water represents our watery planet, which, as you know, more than 70% of this world is covered with water, salt water. Of the water that's available on this earth, both salt water and fresh water, only about 3% of it is fresh water, and most of that is in the glaciers, like in Antarctica or Greenland or at the top of the Alps, or it's underground. So this precious fresh water that I just added to our enclosed environment is precious indeed. But it is now salty, so it is now representing the ocean, as we had already added salt, cayenne, and ginger, representing the different minerals and salts that are inherent in the earth. So I will add the fire. The fire comes from the internal combustion in our planet, from the gravitational rotation of the earth creating that heat and that mechanism which allows us to heat things. So again, in the earth, this heat would represent available thermo heat. So that's not explaining it very well, but an example would be volcanoes or hot springs or something like that. So we're going to add some heat. You can see the smoke coming out. And then I'm going to put our atmosphere. And this atmosphere is like an invisible casing around our planet. And it's primarily made up of ozone, which is created when lightning hits water, or it's created through the respiration of our green items on this planet. And it very luckily contains us, gives us a protective skin against the universe's radiation. There's lots of natural radiation coming from the sun, coming from planetary bodies that are moving through, from dark matter. So this is our protective aspect. Now, we're going to start heating it. What I want to discuss today is sort of a fundamental principle if you all like to cook. And if the only thing you can cook is pasta, think of how you get the water boiling for pasta, and then you add a little bit of salt. What does the salt do? The salt actually lowers the boiling point of water. So the boiling point of water is normally 100 degrees centigrade, Celsius, and it lowers it slightly so the water boils sooner. So any salts or any additives to water actually have that same effect. So if you think of this environment that we've created right now as what our Earth has been like for the last 10,000 years before the Ice Age, and yes, there's a lot of variability in our climate and what's going on because there are lots of living beings. And the Earth, being a closed system, always has the same amount of energy and water within the system. So when it's being displaced from one to the other, it has to reach equilibrium again. By the way, this happens in our bodies too. That's why you need to drink water every day, to flush those salts that you've eaten in the chips, or in my case, chocolate chip cookies. So what we're doing is we're heating it up to reach a certain ambient temperature that will keep this food cooking nice and slowly like a stew. But let's think about what happens if we go a little bit crazy and we start adding some new materials. Some cumin, for example. Very good for the digestion, also very tasty and aromatic. Will go nicely with the meat and the vegetables. However, representing some man-made chemicals. What's it going to do? Some star anise. Lovely, smells wonderful, very useful to us. But again, representing plastic going into our oceans. Look how you can see it, how it's already moving the zucchini and other things. There is always a cause and effect to everything. And then some oregano. Love it. Also smells wonderful. Pulls all the spices together. But what is that doing? The addition of these three spices is immediately heating the water faster. I don't know if you can see it, but it's already starting to boil around the edges. The net effect, once you put the atmosphere back on, is that you have to turn down the heat in order to be able to handle the added herbs representing chemicals, man-made plastic, other things such as that, in order for this not to boil over, right? So this analogy is what I'm trying to explain is happening in our world today. And I hope that makes sense to you. I'm willing to take a lot of questions. I hope you'll listen to my podcast tonight. I drop it on anchor.fm every Wednesday, and it's also available on Apple and Spotify, Nature for Nurture. And tune back in when we see how everything starts cooking. I'm going to pause you.